everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm back today to share with you recreating a card design. So a while back I made this card and that was part of the Imagine Crafts and Joy Claire Stamps blog hop that we did, and I wanted to create that card design again or something very similar, but I wanted to switch it up a little bit, so I wanted to show you how I went about doing that today. So I'm starting off with a piece of watercolor paper here. This is an A2 sized. I knew I wanted to cut it down, so I just started with a very large size. Now I'm using the Doodle Flowers stamp set from Joy Claire Stamps, and I'm going to be stamping in Versamark ink. So I'm going to be heat embossing this basically. Now I did prep my surface with my embossing bag, and as I go along I'm going to be stamping and applying powder. So in order to do that and not make a complete mess of my workspace, I stamp a few times, then I've got my coffee filter where I'm going to keep my embossing powder contained. So I'll go ahead and sprinkle that right over the few stamps I did so I can see them and I don't do any like double stamping or overlapping of my stamps. I stamp those down, add my embossing powder right over that coffee filter, then I can go back and add a few more, sprinkle on some more embossing powder, and then I can heat set different sections. I like to wait until the last minute to heat set just because I don't like to warp my paper a whole lot. I find it easier to kind of heat set all at once than to heat set in places, and then I end up overheating, warping my paper, sometimes burning my embossing powder. Once I have that completely covered with stamps, I'm going to go ahead and do some watercoloring. I'm using several distress inks: cracked pistachio, twisted citron, abandoned coral, squeezed lemonade, dusty concord, and salty ocean. Now I've got a piece of white cardstock that I've laminated that I use as my palette, and I'm going to be using a watercolor brush. I thought this was the fastest way to do this watercoloring. I don't normally use a water brush, but I thought for this instance I really wanted to, just to make things nice and quick. So for different flowers that I stamped, I'm going to be using different colors. Now I did use white embossing powder for this, so the lines of the stamp don't show up until I put on this color, which I love this effect. So I'm moving on to Squeeze Lemonade here. And I'm using very, very bright colors here. Next up is Dusty Concord, and I'm just going to put that right on all of the flowers that look like this one. Then finally, I'm going to be using that Twisted Citron in all of those little type of fern flowers that I stamped. And then once that is done, I'm going to move on to Salty Ocean. Now for the Salty Ocean, I'm going to put this in between all of the different flower stamps. So I need to be very careful with this, but I also need to work a little bit quickly because this does dry pretty quickly and you get those weird lines that you sometimes do when you do a watercolor wash. Now every once in a while I don't mind those. And they did show up in a few places here, but I wanted to keep this a very flat wash of color. So I'm moving quickly, making sure things stay wet on my paper so I don't get those. The heat embossing is also a nice feature, especially when you're doing something like this, because it creates a little well for your color. So not only does it keep all of my colors from the flowers inside the flowers, but it also keeps this blue color from seeping inside them and contaminating those colors. So I get some really rich colors that don't blend together and create mud. So I'm just finishing up this last little portion here. You can see I worked around the outside edge and then finally right towards the center, making sure to keep it all very wet, keep the water moving, and going back and touching up different sections where I thought maybe I got just a little bit too much color or the lines overlapped a little funny. So once that was done, I did some die cutting. I die cut that panel after I heat set it with a rectangle die, and then I used a scalloped rectangle for the mat. Now I also did a piece of white cardstock that I die cut from a smaller rectangle and a craft mat for that as well with a scalloped rectangle. All of those dies are in the Tonic mixed rectangle die set. So on that smallest white rectangle, I'm going to be using the Hello Sentiment stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that hello right in the center. Now I'm using black dye ink. I want a nice contrast from my other colors, something very rich and bold, so I decided to go with black. And then I'll just stamp that down. I'm using my mini Misty, so I give it a few stamps just to make sure it's nice and rich and dark. Then I've got a piece of just yellow cardstock. This is a lighter yellow that matches that squeezed lemonade. And I stamped Sunshine from the Hello Sentiment stamp set. Now I wasn't sure where I wanted to put that sunshine, so I first cut it down a little bit. Now I left it a little bit longer just to kind of play with the placement. I decided I didn't like it on the left hand side, so I'm actually going to end up cutting it a little bit shorter and putting it on the right hand side. That's something I like to do. I like to play around with the placement of my sentiments, and just keeping it a little bit longer allowed me to have that playtime with it. So once that was all done, I started putting this card together. So on the craft piece with the watercolor, I am going to be popping it up. Now I did go ahead and put quite a bit of adhesive on the back of it just to make sure that it stays nice and flat against that craft mat that I'll have behind it. And once I have the backing paper off, I'll go ahead and center that right over the top and place it down. Now I'm also going to do the same thing with the hello. I'll put some adhesive right on the back of it, just not as much on this one because I don't have all that water and that warping on it. So I'll go ahead and put a few pieces down, and I found that the best thing to use to get up my backing paper is my quick sticks tool. I had been using my fingernail and I sliced underneath my fingernail and my finger got really big and swollen, so I've learned my lesson with that. So I just use my quick sticks tool now to go ahead and peel up that backing paper. Now once I had both of those down, I am going to pop both of them up with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive. This is my favorite way to pop things up just because I have a hard time dealing with foam tape, especially when I have to cut it down. So I just find that fun foam and double-sided adhesive works better for me, but use whatever works best for you. So I went ahead and popped that up on an A2 side folding card base, and that is a white card base. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the Hello Sentiment. I just put my backing paper, or my fun foam, right on the back of it, peeled up the adhesive on the other side, and I'll place that right in the center. Then finally is my Sunshine, which I have this teeny tiny piece of fun foam with double-sided adhesive on it. I'll go ahead and peel up the backing paper off of that and place it flush with that white piece on the right hand side. Now to add just a little bit of shine to this card, I grabbed out my liquid pearls in Perfect Pearl, I believe it is, and I'm going to add quite a few drops of this around my card and just scatter them in between my stamps here. I love these liquid pearls and the enamel accents and the Nuvo drops. They are a great way for me, a clean and simple card maker like me, to add this shine and dimension without being too much. Plus, I find that I use it a lot more, and I get to make my own sizes that are customized to the size I need them on any certain card. So these are just my favorite way to add a pearl-like accent. Once that was done though, that finished off this card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to leave you with a close-up of this finished card and a few pictures as well. On the left side of your screen, you're going to see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to the supply list for this card, and the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!